Hey guys, so recently I've thought about something that I hadn't really thought about before, and that was the fact that launch coasters are probably my favorite roller coasters out there. No, I'm not saying that I don't like RMCs and stuff. I love RMCs and old wooden coasters, but I don't really think that there's anything that can beat a really good launch coaster. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking the 20 launch coasters that I've been on from worst to best. Before we get into the video, I'd like to mention that I also have a free Patreon. If you want to go subscribe to that, it's patreon.com/loreoftherides. And I also have a free Discord server that I will link in the description. Also, if you like my videos, please consider liking and subscribing, as it would help my channel out a lot. But with that, let's get into my top 20 launched roller coasters.
Some of these videos have been taken from other YouTubers. I will credit their videos both on screen and in the description. In other words, I worked really hard on this video, so please don't copyright strike me.
Coming in at number 20 is the RC Racer roller coaster at Disney Studios Paris. This Intamin shuttle coaster is the perfect example of what a kid's first launch coaster should probably be. As an enthusiast, I think this is fun, but is overall really forceless. It doesn't help that it has the painful over-the-shoulder restraints, which can really staple you and limit the floater airtime on the spikes. The launches are very underwhelming, and its ride time is an absolute joke, only going around about 3 times. When I rode it, I went in the single rider line and only had to wait 2 cycles, which is about the amount that I'm willing to wait for that ride. But it's an overall fun ride and worth your time if the line is short enough. Coming in at number 19 is Superman Escape from Krypton Going Forwards at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This ride is often criticized for its weak launch, short ride time, and how it doesn't even always go up to the red area on the spike. And while I definitely won't deny that, it's way more fun than people make it out to be. The floater on the spike is really fun, and the ride operators, especially at Magic Mountain, can be very, very funny when they're sending you off. Overall, I personally really enjoy this ride, even though other people don't, and I don't think it deserves all the hate that it gets, even if some of it's true. Coming in at number 18 are the spinning Intamin half-pipe coasters. This ride is almost the exact same as RC Racer, except for the fact that it has 2 sets of spinning cars. Avatar Airbender in the Mall of America had more spinning than Half-Pipe Havoc, but both rides seem to have a longer ride time than RC Racer, which leads to a better ride experience overall. Coming in at number 17 is Wicked Twister at Cedar Point. This now-defunct Intamin inverted impulse model roller coaster was the first impulse model to have 2 twisted spikes on both sides. Its simple yet effective design was actually quite fun, giving really good floater airtime on both spikes and a punchy launch. Unfortunately, this ride closed in late 2021 to be replaced with the most likely inferior Spinning Wild Mouse in the boardwalk section. But if you're still dying to ride Wicked Twister, there's one in China called the legendary Twin Dragon, which looks forceless compared to the original, but has the same design. Coming in at number 16 is Poltergeist at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. This Premier Rides launch coaster was decently smooth when I rode it in the summer of 2022. I also rode it almost right after they got a new station building and refurbishment. I don't remember the launch being very powerful, but launching right out of the tunnel into the bright Texas sun was blinding. Needless to say, this added a lot to the insanity of the ride. Also, the head chopper effects on this ride were pretty crazy, and I always enjoy any sort of spaghetti bowl coaster, so this may be a biased ranking. If you've ridden it recently, please tell me in the comments how well it rides now. At number 15, we have Pegasus Express at Parc Astérix in France. And if you haven't ridden this ride, consider this your spoiler warning. From America to France, this Gerstbauer tire launch coaster is quite unique, but is also pretty rough. I rode in the middle, and it was an extremely fun ride, interacting with the terrain, going through a sign, and there's even a backwards launch in the middle where you traverse a similar course backwards. It had a bit of a rattle when I rode it, but it wasn't enough to ruin the ride. This met my expectations when I rode it and was also quite a long ride. In my opinion, probably one of Gerstlauer's best creations. Coming in at number 14 is Superman Escape from Krypton Going Backwards. This is the much better side of the Superman Tower with a unique backwards launch and even better floater than when you're going forwards. I was in the second to last row when I rode this, but I'm sure the front row was an even crazier experience. The reason I think this side is better than going forwards is because when you're going backwards, you can actually see the ground instead of just looking up into the sky. I wish this ride had a flash pass entrance so that I could ride it multiple times in a row with no line. Number 13 is Shock at Magic Land, a small park just outside of Rome. There's a very good chance that you've never heard of this ride or the park, but there's also a very good chance you've heard of its manufacturer, Maurer. This model of roller coaster, called the X-Car model, is in a park just outside of Rome, which has a very unique and punchy launch into a big airtime hill, followed by a non-inverting loop, a tight turnaround, another hill, and the mid-course brakes. This ride is very similar to Rip Ride Rockit at Universal Studios Orlando, but it's a lot more intense. After the mid-course, it's followed by a twisted drop, a slow heartline roll, and it finally hits the brake run. Definitely not the longest ride, but I rode it at least 3 times, and it alone is worth the hour drive from Rome. Coming in at number 12 is Avengers Assemble Flight Force at Disney Studios Paris. Going just over to France, this ride is a clone of another ride on this list, but I would say this version is a lot weaker. This ride's pre-show is amazing, with a very detailed and lifelike animatronic of Iron Man who speaks French, accompanied by Captain Marvel who speaks English. The ride itself isn't bad by any means, and like I said before, I'm a sucker for a spaghetti bowl coaster, but its theming is lackluster at best. Not to say that the amount of theming is bad, but having one of my least favorite Marvel heroes being the one that speaks English is kind of a disappointment. Another complaint that I have is that its launch is a lot weaker than its clone. The main redeeming factor of this ride is that it only has a maximum of a 10-minute line, which made it very easy to re-ride. I'll get to the actual layout of this ride when I get to its clone. Coming in at number 11 is Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. I was only 8 years old when I rode this, so I don't have the best memory of it, but I do remember loving it. This park and this ride is what got me into roller coasters, so I'm glad I got to ride it before it closed. My guess is that Top Thrill 2 would be better if it were open, but I'm 100% sure the original's launch was much better. Coming in at number 10 is Rock'n Roller Coaster at Disney's Hollywood Studios Orlando. This is the clone that I was talking about with Avengers Assemble, but I find this one much better since it has a better soundtrack than the Avengers, it has no screens, and it has a much better pre-show. The actual layout of this ride goes launch into a sea serpent roll, up into a block zone, then it meanders into a corkscrew, and then up into another block zone, then it meanders to the final brake run. Also, the launch on this one is a lot more punchy than Avengers Flight Force. Coming in at number 9 is Hyperspace Mountain at Disneyland Paris. From one indoor launch coaster to another, this is basically a longer and more intense version of Rock'n Roller Coaster, having more drops, a longer ride time, and over 20 more feet in height. Just by the way, this POV that I'm showing right here is not Hyperspace Mountain, it is Space Mountain Mission 2. The main difference between the two is the fact that Hyperspace Mountain is a lot darker and has Star Wars music playing. To start, you get launched out of a cannon into darkness. Then you do a helix around the entire bowl going into your first inversion. After that, you meander around for a little bit more, then you go into a corkscrew. Then comes the best part of the ride. You then get taken up a drive tire lift, only to be taken down a very steep, twisted drop. In the front row, it's not very good, but in the back row, it gives you a lot of ejector airtime. After the drop, you do a helix and then a cutback, and then you meander to the brake run. The main part about this ride that I don't like is that it has vest restraints. I normally don't mind them, but on this ride specifically, they were very tight. But this shouldn't affect you unless you're taller than the average person. Coming in at number 8 is the Incredicoaster at Disney's California Adventure. This Intamin launch coaster originally opened as California Screamin' in 2001. It had over 6,000 feet of track length and an amazing soundtrack. This ride goes up and down multiple enclosed airtime hills, goes through a lot of helixes, and also has one loop in the middle. When it opened, California Screamin' had no theme, but in 2018 it got the re-theme it deserved, being themed to The Incredibles and calling it the Incredicoaster. It opened with new theme music, static figures in the tunnel, and a new storyline. I think this ride is perfect no matter where you ride it, but I would especially recommend the front row because on that first hill you get ejected out of your seat. This ride isn't too intense, it's decently smooth, and has a very lengthy ride time of 2 minutes and 36 seconds. The last time we were at Disneyland, I rode this 6 times in one day. Just goes to show how re-rideable it is too. If you want to watch this ride in its entirety, I have a video on my channel and I'll leave a link to it in the description. Coming in at number 7 is Sandy's Blastin' Bronco in the American Dream Mall in New Jersey. From one Intamin launch to another, this one is far more intense than the Incredicoaster. This ride has probably my favorite LSM launch and very decent hang time. And here I will give another spoiler warning for this ride if you've never ridden it. There is a twist to this ride, however. Once you get to the station and you think you're done, there's a turntable that immediately flips you around. After it flips you around, you then launch backwards and do the whole course again backwards. It's a unique experience that's very hard to find anywhere else. When I rode this, there was a little bit of a rattle in the valleys, but other than that, it was decently smooth. Coming in at number 6 is Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. This mouthful of a name for a coaster isn't the most intense or thrilling, but it probably has the best theming on any roller coaster I've been on. And I'm sorry, but I have to give out another spoiler warning for this ride. This ride starts with a nice launch section through the forest where you get to see Fluffy, Shroots, and the Forbidden Forest. You then see the Weasley's car and go up a near vertical spike. A switch track then activates, which sends you backwards and into a drop track. After that, you hit the fastest of 7 launches before hitting the brakes, seeing a unicorn, and then you're back to the station. When this ride first opened, it had a total cost of $300 million, making it the world's most expensive roller coaster. This ride is also over 5,000 feet long and has a ride duration of over 3 minutes. All of the special elements on this ride make it truly one of a kind, and I would highly recommend getting on it. Coming in at number 5 is Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm. This Intamin accelerator coaster was the first ever hydraulic launch on any coaster. You launch straight out of the station into a 205-foot top hat, back down into 2 overbanks and into the brakes. The best part of this ride by far is its launch, which goes from 0 to 82 miles per hour in 2.3 seconds. The only thing stopping this ride from being higher on the list is its length. I know that when they were both open, Top Thrill Dragster and King the Ka only had the top hat, but still, this ride is extremely short. But with the amount of space Knott's Berry Farm had to work with, this is not a bad ride whatsoever. Coming in at number 4 is Maverick at Cedar Point. Maverick was the world's first blitz coaster and was originally going to be about 5 times more intense than it is. The S-turn between the rocks at the end was originally going to be a high-speed Heartline roll. Unfortunately for some enthusiasts, this was removed due to stress on the track. Thankfully, this ride is still very intense. Its speed, pacing, and low-to-the-ground turns make it one of the best Intamin roller coasters out there. Coming in at number 3 is the Incredible Hulk at Universal's Islands of Adventure. This is one of only a few B&M tire launch coasters, and my favorite roller coaster of all time when I first rode it. It starts off with a very intense first launch that you don't see coming. The first half of this ride is very intense, but it kind of drops off after the mid-course. But even then, the corkscrews after the mid-course give some decent hang time. And if you were wondering, the main reason why this ride is so high up is because of its soundtrack. Thankfully, the best part of the soundtrack is in the second half, which elevates it to be almost as good as the first half. In my opinion, this is one of the most underrated roller coasters in America that does not get enough love. Coming in at number 2 is Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I just recently rode this, and when I went in, I didn't have very high expectations, but I was absolutely blown away. The first launch is very punchy and intense, and it also has great hang time on the loop and the dive loop going backwards. The backwards launch is very powerful, and going back through forwards is just pure fun. And just to finish it off, the airtime hill over the loop pulls just about negative 1.4 Gs. If you don't believe me, I have a ride forces comparison on my channel, and I'll link that in the description. The 2 main complaints I have about this ride is that it's very short and the brakes hit way too hard right after the airtime hill. I wasn't expecting it to be as intense as it was, but it turns out that this is an absolute masterpiece of a roller coaster. Coming in as an honorable mention is Velocicoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. I'm not really sure how I feel about this ride. When I first rode it, I got 2 rides on it, and they were both really, really bad. I know that enthusiasts can't really get enough of this ride, but personally, I can't really get away from it. I thought the launches were both very weak. I think the layout is weak. And when I rode it, it also had an extreme rattle in the middle row. The one redeeming factor of this ride was that Mosasaurus roll over the water. When I first rode it, I knew it was going to be intense, but I didn't know it was going to be that intense. But from what I've heard from other enthusiasts, I'm pretty sure I just got 2 really bad rides on this ride. And whenever I get over to Universal Studios next, I'll try and re-ride this and get actual good rides. But for now, it stays here. And coming in at number 1, my favorite launch roller coaster, and probably my favorite roller coaster ever, is Toot Tootiste at Parc Astérix. The most popular video on my YouTube channel as of now is Toot Tootiste at Parc Astérix with over 100,000 views, and I'm glad that's the case. And as I said earlier, this Intamin multi-launch coaster is possibly my favorite roller coaster of all time. It is very smooth and has very high quality launches, both forwards and backwards. The launch section right after leaving the station has a hang-time-packed 0G stall with a very smooth outer bank to airtime hills. The main part of the ride then starts with multiple launches over a speed hill, 2 moments of amazing weightlessness, then a nice airtime pop over the top hat and down the drop. Most people will say that the second half is just filler, but I would highly disagree. There's an amazing 0G stall after the top hat, followed by a low-to-the-ground wave turn, a powerful airtime hill, then another wave turn slightly higher in the air, then what feels like an exact copy of Velocicoaster's Mosasaurus roll. That's then followed by an overbank, bunny hills, and the brakes. The restraints have some give, which stops any possible stapling, and they're also very soft. The seats are also very comfortable and feel like they give you a much-needed break from walking. The layout and theming work together to make a masterpiece of a ride full of forceful elements and unique features. But I'd also love to hear your opinions. Feel free to leave your favorite launch coaster in the comments. If you'd like this ranking video, please let me know by liking the video and subscribing to my channel, as it would help out a lot. Also, for more Lord of the Rides content, go check out my Patreon at patreon.com/LordOfTheRides and check out my free Discord server, which I will link in the description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.